deceptive. The mantra of the perfection wisdom is declared Tadyatha Gate Gate Para Gate Parasanga de Bodhiswaha Shariputra the Bodhisattvas, the great beings, should train in the perfection of wisdom in this way. Thank you. This is a homage to the mother of all the Buddhas, the perfection of wisdom, the perfection which is beyond words, inconceivable, inexpressible, unproduced, unobstructed in the nature of space, the object domain of the self-aware wisdom. Verse of salutation from Abhisamaya Alankara, ornament of clear realization by Maitreya. Through the knowledge of all, the Shravakas seeking peace are led to true peace. Through knowledge of the path, those intending to benefit transmigrating beings fulfill the aims of the world, being perfectly endowed with an omniscient mind. The sages give various teachings with all kinds of aspects. I bow down to the mother of Buddhas together with the communities of hearers and bodhisattvas. And I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of teachers, who taught that which arises through dependent relationship is without cessation, without arising, without annihilation, without permanence, without coming, without going, without distinction, without identity, and peaceful, free from fabrications. Homage to Gautama, who moved by compassion toward the sacred dharma to rid us of all misconceived views. So the teaching that we are going to do since all of you, my Dharma brothers and sisters, have come here taking pains, going through hardships, and enthusiastic come here. We are today in the 21st century, where there is a very high advancement in science and technology and education related with science. And the religious traditions which have existed for over 1,000 years. Amongst them, there are those which are based mainly on faith, without much philosophical explanation. And this also helps many beings. For some people, it's beneficial when they are able to keep faith alone. Because the religious traditions teach how to help others and not hurt or cause harm to others. And then when you pose questions why such and such things are taught, then we find in the Indian tradition there are answers given. And it's been for over 300,000 to 400,000 years. And then over the last 3,000 years, perhaps there has been more progress in the philosophical traditions of these teachings. So the Sankhya school talks about a pradhana, or the primal factor, from which all the other things evolve. And so, in other words, there is the teaching within these Indian traditions. There is the teaching on the two truths, the conventional and the ultimate. And in Jainism also, Jainism also developed in India, and then after that came Buddhism. And so in this way, we could see there had been progress and advancements in the Indian traditions from the past. And the practice of shamatha, calm abiding, and vipassana, the penetrative insight, were there in the Indian traditions from a long time. And then, as it advanced further in Buddhism, the Buddha taught that of emptiness. In the Heart Sutra, we find mention of form is empty, emptiness is form. And so things are said to be, in conventional terms, existent in conventional terms, and how, on the basis of the 12 links of dependent origination, the ignorance is taken to be the root of all cyclic existence. And this ignorance, the misconception, whether it is an erroneous view or not, should be checked in relation to the object it conceives. And so we can't just say this is erroneous without any reason. And therefore the Buddha, with his marvelous intelligence and wisdom, and he became fully knowledgeable about the, gained full knowledge and insight into the selflessness of things, how things are without any self or independent existence. And therefore, today, when there are lots of questions that arise in people's mind as to why and how the different teachings were given, and therefore we need to have a thorough explanation. And so Buddhism in general, and in particular, particularly Nalanda tradition, teaches what is the ground reality, which is there, the basic thing, the reality, how things exist. Because without that reality, we cannot talk about how things come about through causes and conditions. And so there's the teaching of causality, the law of causality. And on the basis of that also, we come about understanding that of how things appear and how the appearance is not the reality. And so it becomes, such a teaching becomes, reasonable, based on reason. And the more you delve into such teaching, the greater your conviction will be. So in Asia, there are many countries which have been traditionally Buddhist countries. And today, in countries which were not traditionally Buddhist countries, where Buddhism had not spread in the past, Buddhism is spreading these days. And even amongst the modern scientists, there are people who are attracted to the Buddhist concept of dependent origination. And I asked one of my scientist friends whether this concept of dependent origination is found in science or not. The person said no. But today, in the recent times, this person told me that the concept of dependent origination has actually pushed itself into the scientific world, and now it has found a chair amongst the scientists, this scientific world. And so with regard to dependent origination, in Je Rinpoche's Gongpa Rapsel, there is the mention of the dependent origination in terms of causality, and then dependence in terms of parts and whole, and then ultimately that things are merely nominally existent and designated. And so these are the three levels of understanding the dependent origination. As I said yesterday also, things have no objective existence is even said in quantum physics. So someone who has quite a good understanding of quantum physics at that level, if if you go further, not just being satisfied with the Chittamatra view, but we could go on to the understanding of the Madhyamakas, the Madhyamaka view, saying that things are merely nominally existent. And so if you actually logically check how things exist, that's the way it exists. That there's no other way but nominally designated that things are. And so Buddhism, and this, in particular the Nalanda tradition, is something which can go and side by side with modern science. And of course, the other religious traditions also are beneficial to so many people around the world. And amongst the religious traditions, we have Christianity, which is called serving humanity greatly in terms of education and health care. For example, in the case of Mother Teresa, she was totally dedicated for the well-being of others. And so her dedication comes through her faith in Catholicism. And so all the religious traditions are beneficial to human beings. But when it comes to explaining the teachings scientifically, we have the Nalanda tradition, which can do so. So we, the followers of Buddhism as our traditional religion, it's very important for us to study Buddhism. If you really put the teaching of the Buddha under the lens of examination, I mean, we can actually do a lot of examination and analysis of the teaching. And when we study the Prajnaparamita on the basis of the ornament of clear realization, then, of course, in Haribhadra's commentary on Abhisamaya Alankara, it says, it mentions two types of followers. One who are of dull faculty, following the Dharma on the basis of faith, and the other on the basis of reason, those of sharp faculty. Now, in order to practice the Dharma, we need to actually know how to go about with the practice from the foundation, building the foundation and then the walls and so forth, the roofs. So just as we would construct a house with a firm foundation and then the walls come up and the pillars and so forth and then the roof. So in the similar way, we should practice the Dharma. So the object or the goal of Buddhism is nirvana. In other words, the true cessation, the ultimate cessation is nirvana. And so so with regard to nirvana, there is nirvana, which is a mere freedom from the mental afflictions. And within the Buddhas, there is the Swabhavika Kaya, which is the freedom from all defilements, including the imprints of the afflictive emotions, which are called cognitive obscurations. So we need to use our intelligence to really push ourselves through to that enlightenment. So Prajnaparamita is the term that is used for the realization that we gain. And which shows that we need to use our intelligence. So that omniscient mind of a Buddha, which sees the varieties of things, the diversities, as well as the reality of how things are simultaneously, has to come through the practice of wisdom. And you should be able to expand your the practices, and so that it grows further and further. And therefore, in the Heart Sutra, we come across this this mantra of that Yatha Gati, Gati, Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Swaha, referring to the paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and then the normal learning. So Gati means let's go, let's go. Or in terms of imperative case, you can say go, go. So as a human person, when you are able to generate a genuine sense of wishing to be free from samsara, and that genuine sense of renunciation or the wish to be free from samsara to reach nirvana is the path of accumulation generally. And then in terms of the bodhisattva path, when you have the genuine experience of bodhicitta, that's the Mahayana path of the bodhisattva path of accumulation. And then the second gati refers to the path of preparation, which is reached when you develop this experiential insight into the emptiness through that of a meditation, through the power of meditation. And then as you develop further and further, your dualistic appearance to the mind will become thinner and thinner. And then you reach the stage where you see emptiness directly. And so that's the path referred by Paragati, the path of seeing, which means go beyond the shore. So which means go beyond the worldly stage, or the transcendent stage. So Paragati refers to that, and then Parasamgati shows that of the path of meditation, which is the path where you continue to meditate on emptiness, the experience of which you have gained directly in the earlier on the earlier path, the path of seeing. And then you go through the 10 bodhisattva grounds. The first 7 are called the impure bodhisattva grounds. And during those 7 states, 7 grounds of bodhisattvas, you mainly work on, you overcome those of the mental afflictions. And then during the last 3 grounds, from the 8th grounds onwards, you work on overcoming the obscuration to knowledge. And then finally, you reach Buddhahood, which is referred by Bodhi Swaha. And so lay the foundation, or is referred by that, so Bodhi Swaha. And so this is like going through the school system from the kindergarten, junior, then middle school, and the senior school, and then the higher, colleges, universities. So within the practice, there are practices leading to higher rebirths and that of the ultimate goal of enlightenment. And so in order to reach nirvana, we need to attain the higher rebirths, so that we are also able to continuously practice the dharma, and in that kind of a higher rebirth, more fortunate rebirth, we could also live long to be able to do the practices well. And so this is what is mentioned in the Precious Garland by Master Nagarjuna, that first you should attain the higher rebirth and then the definite goodness. And so in the 400 verses also, it is shown how to go about with such practices. First, get rid of non-meritorious ones, and then in the middle, get rid of the notion of a self. It says, because non-meritorious karma leads you to the unfortunate realms of existence, the bad existences. And therefore you need to get rid of or avoid those karmas. And with regard to the 16 non-meritorious, the non-meritorious actions. There are 16 which need to be overcome or abandoned, according to Ratnavali. And so His Holiness is asking, amongst the Koreans, how many of you like to drink alcohol? So the 16 includes the 10 non-virtuous actions, overcoming them, abandoning them, and then not taking alcohol, and then not indulging in wrong livelihood. By gaining things through deceptive manners or abusing others, and then not harming others. And then not harming here refers to not only the harm that is referred in the 10 non-virtuous actions, but not belittling others so that you are abusing them. And then honoring those who are honorable or object of veneration, so with respect. And then when you give alms to poor people or beings, you should not look down upon them, considering them to be lower than yourself. This is what happens to us when we do give alms to others. We should not do that, but instead give respectfully. So giving respectfully, as it is said in the 8 verses of training the mind. Whenever I associate with others, I look upon myself as the lowest, and so these are the 16 causes or factors leading to higher rebirths mentioned in precious garland of Nagarjuna. And then in the middle, it says overcome those. In the second line of the 400 verses, it says in the middle, get rid of the notion of a self. So in order to practice about it, go through stages. And then on the basis of morality, you can do that of the concentration, single-pointed concentration, meditation. So with regard to developing the calm abiding in the stages of meditation by Kamaleshila, the middle book, it mentions those of the shortcomings or pitfalls of that you may fall into, those of the mental laxity or thinking and excitation. So how they arise and how to overcome them are taught in this text. And then you develop single-pointed an experience where you are able to stay focused on the object single-pointedly with full alertness. And when you develop that, then you have a very powerful mind which can be used to investigate the nature of things, whatever object you may choose to investigate or analyze. And then, on the basis of that single-pointed concentration, you could actually develop that of the special insight. And within the special insight there, you could mainly focus on that of the selflessness of things. And so there are different, of course, explanations, interpretations with regard to selflessness, according to the different philosophical schools. But the best philosophical view of selflessness is found in the Master Nagarjuna's tradition. The more you delve and examine and analyze, you can actually do so. And therefore, in order to gain insight into this, we have the text written by the followers of Master Nagarjuna, and to help us push ourselves further into this view, we have also Bhaviveka's texts. And then the third line of the 400 verses says, finally, destroy all views. And so, when you are able to couple it with that of the view of selflessness or emptiness, with that of the bodhicitta, you are able to tread along the path to reach that ultimate goal of enlightenment. And so, bodhicitta, there's no other greater factor or principle than bodhicitta to accumulate merit and overcome or purify our negativities. And so, for the practice of bodhicitta, this altruistic spirit of enlightenment, we have the greatest text, which is the greatest text for that is Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. And His Holiness was asking if this text exists in Korean translation. So, 1967, I received teaching on it, and it has helped me to transform myself. And this has come in combined with that of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna. And then in the 10th chapter of Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, it says all these branches of teachings were taught by the sage for wisdom. Ninth. So for developing bodhicitta, based on through reasoning, the best is found in that of Bodhisattva Charya Avatara. And in the chapter on patience, it actually teaches all the faults and defects of anger or hatred. And then on top of that, in the 8th chapter, it is the Shantideva teaches that the faults of self-cherishing attitude, the extreme self-centeredness, and the good qualities of cherishing others. And it says, all suffering in the world comes through wishing oneself to be happy. All happiness and joy in the world comes through wishing others to be happy. So when you actually use all these reasonings that are given in this chapter, you'll see how the self-cherishing attitude is actually made dumbfounded. So bodhicitta is the greatest factor for accumulating merit, and also to overcome all the negative actions and negativities which we have accrued in relation to sentient beings. And so all these bad karmas that we have created in relation to sentient beings, to purify them, and the greatest factor is bodhicitta. And Kadamba masters have said that you should put every effort in do your best to develop bodhicitta. So to have a good health in this life, I mean, the bodhicitta is the factor that will help. And then to have more friends, also bodhicitta helps for that. And if you remain self-centered, you will not have friends. You may remain lonely, alone. So when people find out that you are someone who is a totally selfish person, and of course they will also shun you. So as opposed to that, if you actually care about others, think about their well-being, and from the depths of your heart, even animals would come to you and appreciate you. Therefore, by riding the horse of bodhicitta, which leads you from joy to joy, or bliss to bliss, and bodhicitta, which brings you only benefit, short-term and long-term, which a sensible person would despair to ride that horse. As Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, thus, that which relieves you from all despair, whether it's a mental discomfort or physical ones. So, Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, which sensible person would actually feel discouraged to ride this horse of bodhicitta, which leads them from joy to joy. So there's no greater factor than bodhicitta to achieve great waves of your results that you would aspire to. So, through Maitreya, we have the tradition of the extensive conduct lineage, and then Master Nagarjuna down. And Master Nagarjuna also mentions in the Ratnavali so with regards to developing, so Master Nagarjuna gives this the practice of developing bodhicitta on the basis of exchanging self, equaling and exchanging self and others. Whereas when we follow that of the tradition of developing bodhicitta on the basis of the 6 courses and 7 results, it becomes a slightly more difficult. So all the problems in the world that we see are because of selfishness of people and abusing and others and deceiving others is all due to selfishness. So if human beings who have this marvelous brain have such an attitude, then there's no need to talk about the poor animals who have no such brain. And so all our misfortunes, our problems, difficulties are rooted in our selfish attitude, and therefore this verse gives a great summary of how we create the situation for ourselves. As it says, all happiness or joy in the world comes from wishing others to be happy, all suffering from the wishing oneself to be oneself alone. And therefore, the third line of the 400 verses says, finally, rid yourself of all misconceived views. And the one who is able to do all this is a wise one. And so now it's already 10 o'clock, so we'll have a break, 15-minute break, like yesterday. And today we'll have Koreans asking questions. The question and answer session is for the Koreans. 자, 베제랑 가물에. 알레 오, 틱스. So many foreigners take interest in Tantra, thinking that it is the quick path, swift path to enlightenment, and within a very short period of time. And they also like to take lots of initiations. So with regard to Tantra, or secret mantrayana, in Tibet, the Tantras have become very prevalent. Has spread widely. So if you see the benefit of Tantra, it is said that you are able to attain enlightenment within 3 years, 3 months, and so forth, period of time. So there is such an exaggeration or kind of a popularity of Tantra. So I see this, there is some fault in it. Without really engaging in the study of the teaching of the Buddha. So I usually say that according to Nyengun Sungrapa, one of a great Tibetan master, he makes a division of the teaching of the Buddha into the general structure teaching of the Buddha and then the specialized teachings. And so the Sutrayana comes within the first category. So in sutras, we find mention of the Buddha, of the audience consisting of humans, gods, asuras, and so forth. So according to the different mental dispositions, the character or the nature of people, and even taking into consideration those of the physical nature, we have the different tantric practices such as Vajrakilaya and so forth, which have to do with the practitioner's the physiological structure and so forth, and those of the vital drops, channels, wind energies, and so forth of the practitioners. And so Tantra is meant for, tailored for specific disciples. And then we have the visions of the Buddhas and so forth to some practitioner, and those practitioners have passed down these practices to their disciples. So we need to understand that in order to be able to practice Tantra well, you really need to study the teaching of the Buddha, and without the understanding of emptiness, you cannot do tantric practice at all. Because right from in the beginning of tantric practice, in order to for yourself to generate yourself into deity, you need to do meditation on emptiness. So Tantra has become quite widespread in Tibet, but people have not gone into the, done thorough study of the teaching of the Buddha. Ladel.
Next question.
Next question comes from Bhikshuni. After having realized the emptiness, how to go about with one's practice? As I explained earlier, with regard to emptiness, for someone who is of sharp faculty, before even entering the path of accumulation, you need to have insight into emptiness, realization of emptiness. And in a commentary on Abhisamaya Alankara, there is mention of wisdom focusing on enlightenment, and with compassion focusing on sentient beings. And so your practice of bodhicitta must be coupled with that of emptiness, view of emptiness. And so, when you understand emptiness, what you see is the possibility of enlightenment that you can attain, that you will be able to attain that of enlightenment. And with that understanding and realization, then you will be able to develop that of the bodhicitta. Without understanding of bodhicitta, you will not know what enlightenment is. And without knowing what enlightenment is, you will not have the aspiration to reach there. And therefore, without the wisdom of emptiness, the view of emptiness, you'll not be able to attain that goal. So not only should you develop this view of emptiness, but you need, after having developed the path of accumulation of the bodhisattvas, you need next to go on to that of the path of preparation. And therefore, once you have realized emptiness, you need to continue with your meditation practice to go upwards in this, in the path leading to, on the path leading to enlightenment. So if we So this question is related to clear light mind. If we have that clear light mind, which is pure from the beginning or something like that, and isn't it the case that it's not dependent on any other factors or causes? And then if we also talk about this clear light, isn't it the same as Atman or the soul? So when we talk about Atman, and what that refers to is an unchanging soul, singular, which comes from the past life to this life without any change. And also that it is something which is said to be autonomous or independently existent. So, Atman and the clear light or luminous mind, which is said to be without beginning and end in Tantra, are not the same. So what we talk about is that there is change going on in beings. So even when we were in hell realms, this clear light mind was already there. And right now, as human beings also, we still have that. But that clear light mind needs to be taken into or transformed into the path, realizing emptiness. With that is more powerful than realizing emptiness on the basis of, with a rough or coarser state of mind. And so this is called without beginning and end, and it is also called Rigpa Kundu Sangpo, the all excellent or good pristine awareness. Although we have this luminous mind, although it's not ignorance as such, but it is. It goes with ignorance within us. But as we get rid of the ignorance, this clear light, the innate, the basic clear light, will be free from the ignorance, and so therefore we can talk about the this clear light mind while we are sentient beings full of called ignorance and so forth, and then also this innate clear light mind within the practitioners who have reached the path. Attained the different paths, and then ultimately the Buddha's mind. And so we can talk about the clear light mind in these different phases. And within consciousness, there are those of the coarse consciousness and the subtle consciousness. The sensory perceptions, sensory consciousness are coarse. And then within the mental consciousness, the mental consciousness at the time of sleep, dreaming, and then called fainting states are subtler. And then at the time of dying, we have the clear light of dying, which is the subtle, innate clear light. And there is also mention of the 4 empty states. And the 4th one is called all empty states. So although all 4 are termed clear as empty states, but within them there is the degree of subtlety. So the clear light mind that we actually refer to, which actually goes up to Buddhahood, is that state of clear light which arises in us after the cessation of those of the blackish near attainment, together with its vehicle, or the subtle prana. So as we go through the tantric practice, we go through the dissolution processes, and finally we come to that state. And with regards to the dissolution process and the evolution of these different states of mind, all happen on the basis of this clear light mind. Everything arises from it, and those of the dissolution processes finally, in the dissolution process, all the different states of mind dissolve into this. So although there are differences in certain explanations, in the Dzogchen tradition, the Dodrup Jigme Tembe Nyima, the third Dodrup Rinpoche, his writings are marvelous. And similarly, either it's Tsulu or somebody else, their writing on Dzogchen is marvelous. And so, Dodrup Jen Rinpoche III had studied all the different traditions, the Madhyamaka philosophical tradition as well as epistemology, logic. So when we actually establish emptiness through reasoning, it is said that emptiness is non-affirming negative, whereas when it comes to actually practice, applying that in practice, then it's a non-affirming negative. Because in tantric practice, as we develop further, we come to the point where the great bliss is the mind on which you focus or maintain it. So there is some reason to say these things, that it is either emptiness is that of the non-affirming or the affirming negative. And so the innate clear light mind that is taught in the Tantra is not at all the same as the non-Buddhist assertion of Atman. So the Savatantrika Madhyamakas down, they actually point at something from amongst the aggregates as being that of the person or the being. But we can actually explain rebirth on the basis of the subtle mind.
예와 군주 전례지왕 엔징야초 연당 남마당 발매 체계 별라 농체 직사랑 낭기 은퇴는 앞종내 도제 창기 곡탕 주십시오.
So he made a prayer to be able to be led by His Holiness, the perfect teacher, from life after life, and reach that of the state of Vajradhara. By enjoying the Dharma. So when I give statue of Buddha, Shakyamuni, I usually tell people that for Buddhists, Buddha is our founder. And one aspect of the Buddha is someone who is a logician. With regard to quantum physics, the concept was already taught by him when he taught that, for example, the Buddha taught the Chitmatra view, which rejects any objective external existence. A friend of mine, Indian nuclear physicist, Raja Ramana, whom I knew, told me about 20 years ago, perhaps. So in the West, it is considered some kind of a new knowledge, whereas in India, the concept of quantum physics was already there 2,000 years ago. And so the Buddha, you can see, is a logician or a thinker. And then, as I quoted this verse, O monks and scholars, just as gold is tested by burning, cutting and polishing, likewise, you should examine my teaching and then accept it, not because you have devotion or faith in me. And so from this aspect, we can see, I tell people that we can see the Buddha was an ancient Indian scientist. So what is emphasized is investigation and analysis into things without and within. And therefore, the Buddha taught that of the concept of dependent origination and one example that I would like to give with regard to investigation of the teaching of the Buddha is that Master Nagarjuna and his followers have actually analyzed the teaching of the Buddha and taught that some of the teachings given by the Buddha himself cannot be taken literally, because they were given to certain specific disciples who were not able to take literally the teaching of the perfection of wisdom discourse, where it says everything is without any inherent or self-characterized existence. And so it is interpreted that the Buddha taught such gave such a teaching with the three natures of in mind. And therefore, Master Chandrakirti says, just like this, there are other sutras which should be taken as interpretable or provisional. So amongst them, he counts Sandhi Nimochana Sutra and whose is it? Someone. Do you hear me? Okay. And so, Chandrakirti makes division of the texts into Chandrakirti and other Madhyamaka masters, categorize the teaching of the Buddha into those interpretables and those which are can be taken as definitive teachings. And regarding the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, I have received teachings from Gyanyima Rinpoche, and I actually had discussions as I went through the text with him. And so I have received the reading transmission of the 6 collections of reasoning by Mahasi Nagarjuna from Gen Rinzin Tempa. So he was a Kinori. So because of his Kenori accent, people hear him differently. Some, when he says something, some hear that there was a tea offering in the monastery. Some hear like, let it be, even if that doesn't exist. I mean, the people hear what he says differently. So in other words, he's only saying that he has received these kind of oral transmissions from people who lived a very simple monk's life. And then there was somebody from Gomang, one Mongolian monk who I received the transmission of Golden Garland, which is a commentary by Master Tsongkhapa on Abhisamaya Alankara, and from Gen Rinzin Tempa, who has received it from Sokpo Jinpa, Mongolian monk, or Geshe Jinpa. So I received from Gyanyima the explanatory commentary on the Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna. So His Holiness was correcting himself from what he had said yesterday with regard to this. So we are on page 4. Go down to 3 paragraphs, and then there's objection. Collectively, there are characteristics. Response, even collectively, how could they exist in one thing at the same time? And so this is doing investigation. Of course, things... How could it be plausible that those with separately are not characteristics and collectively are contradictory? Exist at the same time in one condition thing. So when we talk about arising, something comes into being, and when we say disintegrate or ceasing, it has gone out of existence. So in that case, when something is arising, at that same time it is not enduring or disintegrating. His Holiness got mixed up. His page is mixed up, or so the past has already ceased and the future is not yet to come. When something is enduring, lost. Lost. So consequently, it is not tenable that arising, enduring, disintegrating exist individually as characteristics of conditioned phenomena, since it is said that they arise simultaneously, and because those who know the reality of phenomena claim that arising, enduring, and disintegrating occur simultaneously, it is not tenable for them to individual characteristics. They serve together as characteristics and so forth. And Buddha parenthesis Nagarjuna said, how could they collectively, and so forth. So even collectively, how could they exist in one thing at the same time? How could it be possible that those which separately are not characteristics and collectively are contradictory exist at the same time in one conditioned thing? In that case, when something is arising at the same time, it is not enduring or disintegrating. When something is not enduring at the same time, it is not arising or disintegrating. When something is disintegrating at the same time, it is not arising or enduring. Therefore, it is not tenable that arising, enduring, and disintegrating are the characteristics of conditioned phenomena, either separately or collectively. Because characteristics are not tenable, conditioned phenomena do not exist. Why do you solely employ fallacious arguments such as this, that arising, enduring, and disintegrating of any existent thing are conditioned? So, because they are fallacious and so forth, and we employ them solely in order to make known their fallacious nature. Tell me what it is that arises. Objection: a vase arises. First thing well and tell me at what point does the so-called vase come into being. When it has not arisen, something called a vase is impossible. When it is arisen, it is called a vase, and it possesses the three characteristics, because a vase is a conditioned phenomenon, and that at the same time, arising is a characteristic of the vase. And response, but how could this, on page 5, how could this be tenable? What use is there for that which already exists to arise again? What use would characteristics be for something which already possesses characteristics? But if you think that which is not a vase arises, and having arisen it becomes a vase, then that also is illogical. Is that which is not a vase something which arises? Page 141, 42 tabalta. 141, 42 tabalta. Timarti Teptinal 41, 141 Dawata. So is that which is not a vase something which arises as a straw mat or cloth? Or is that which is not a vase nothing at all? Or is it something else? What is it? In that regard, first, if it were a straw mat or cloth that rises, then having arisen as that, now would it become a vase? But if that which is not a vase were nothing at all, how would that which is nothing at all arise? So I'll just take a rest and find the page for me. That's all I'm saying. Yang Rinpoche seems to have given some page to His Holiness, and His Holiness said he has already read it. So the more the confusion in the pages, the more rest I get. Yang Rinpoche said somewhere here, so not very sure. What is arisal? Tell me. So since vase is a compounded phenomenon, it has the three characteristics. As such, arising, enduring, and disintegrating are merely worldly designations. Already read. In that regard, first, second, third paragraph on page 5, if it were a straw mat or cloth that arises, then having arisen as that, how would it become a vase? But if that which is not a vase were nothing at all, how would that which is nothing at all arise? But if it were to arise, then why wouldn't even a rabbit with horns arise? Therefore, so-called arising is not tenable. So when you do this kind of analysis into things, to say that things have, when you say things have some core existence, and through your analysis, you actually dismantle it, and therefore, without doing any kind of critical analysis into how things are, we should be able to say things exist. And it is said that the meditative equipoise of an Arya being's cognition would be a cause for the destruction of compounded entities. And so Master Chandrakirti says that when you analyze things through the sevenfold reasoning, nothing whatever could be found. But then we should be able to still say that conventionally things exist, and therefore he says we should not analyze the conventionality of things. So Jnana Garba or somebody has, Indian master Jnana Garba or somebody has said, where it says you should, this should not be analyzed. Things appear to have some objective existence, and therefore that is how things exist, and this should not be analyzed. So when you actually go further to analyze the things, then in the Savatantrika Madhyamaka tradition, they say that the true existence of things do not appear to our sensory perception. So without doing any analysis analysis on the conventional nature of things, we should be able to accept things existing. And then there is also an objection which says that things are empty of themselves, in and of themselves by nature. And the three principal aspects of the path says the appearance is dispelling that of the extreme of existence, and emptiness dispelling the extreme of nihilism. And therefore, seeing these two as cause and effect, you will not be carried away by or captivated by the extreme views. If so, arising does not exist, how could it be tenable to state whatever arises is a conditioned phenomenon? How could something which does not arise endure or disintegrate? As such, arising, enduring, and disintegrating are merely worldly designations. Moreover, if arising, enduring, and disintegrating have other characteristics of conditioned phenomena, there would be an infinite regress. If not, they would not be conditioned phenomena. Arising, enduring, disintegrating are thought to be the characteristics of conditioned phenomena. But do they also have other characteristics of conditioned phenomena or not? First, if they had other characteristics of conditioned phenomena, then it follows there would be an infinite regress, for also arising would have the characteristic of arising and other characteristics, and those characteristics would have other characteristics. Since there would be an infinite regress, this is unacceptable. But if you think that such an infinite regress is not appropriate, for they have no other characteristics of conditioned phenomena, then in that case they would not be conditioned phenomena, and so forth. And next comes Buddhapalita Madhyamaka Vritti, Mula Madhyamaka Vritti, section 3, objection: arising, enduring, and disintegrating conditioned phenomena, but it does not follow there is an infinite regress. Why? And then there's answer: the arising of arising causes, the generation of primary arising alone, and primary arising also causes the generation of the arising of arising. If properties arise from phenomena such as consciousness, there are 15 plus itself. That phenomena itself, the arising of that phenomena, the enduring of that phenomena, the disintegrating of that phenomena, the possession of that phenomena, the aging of that phenomena. And here, if that phenomena were white or virtuous, then that phenomena would be liberation. Or if that phenomena were black or non-virtuous, then it would be the false liberation of that phenomena. So too, if that phenomena were renunciation, it would be the renunciation of that phenomena. But if that phenomena were non-renunciation, then non-renunciation of that phenomena would be generated. These are called retinue. then arising of arising, the enduring of endurance, the disintegration of the disintegration, the possession of possession, the aging of aging, liberation of liberation, or the non-liberation of non-liberation, the renunciation of renunciation, or the non-renunciation of renunciation arise. They are called retinue of the retinue. As such, the property of arising plus the basis itself is the arising of 15. That which is primary arising causes generation of 14. There are said to be properties other than the primary characteristic. The arising of arising causes primary arising alone. Thus, since one causes the generation of the other, the infinite regress does not occur. So too, primary endurance causes the endurance of endurance. And so, up to the end of this, there is the response from others, and now our own system analyzes the other schools in response. It says, if for you the arising of arising causes the generation of primary arising, how for you could that which is not generated by primary arising cause the generation of that? If for you the arising of arising causes the generation of primary arising, then how for you could the arising of arising, which was not generated before the primary arising, cause the generation of the primary arising before, because it itself has not arisen? Objection, the arising of arising is generated by primary arising alone, while it, that is the arising of arising, causes generation of primary arising. It is not that which does not cause the generation of it. Response, if for you primary causes, primary arising generates primary arising through that being generated, then how could it cause the generation of that? Through primary arising not being generated. If for you primary arising causes generation of primary arising through the arising of arising being generated, then how could the arising of arising cause the generation of the arising of arising through primary arising not being generated? Thus, for you, one depends on the other, but in this context, it is never permissible that one depends on the other. Objection, the arising that now arises causes generation of the arising of arising, but that which has not yet arisen does not. Response, if for you that now arising and not yet arisen has caused, can cause the generation of that, then you would have to accept it generates that. And for you, the primary arising that is now arising and not arisen, the cause of a generation of another arising of arising, you would have to accept it generates that arising of arising. And then the next paragraph shows that you should be able to posit things without doing any kind of analysis into their conventionality. And then the objection says, though generation is not caused by another arising, arising itself causes generation of itself and others. How? Just as lamplight illuminates itself and other things, so too arising causes generation of itself and also other things. Just as lamplight illuminates itself and illuminates other things such as a vase or a cloth, so too arising also causes generation of itself and also arising generates other things such as a vase or cloth. Response, if lamplight were to illuminate itself and other things, then you would have to accept that arising also causes the generation of itself and the other things, just as lamplight illuminates itself and other things. But lamplight does not illuminate itself and other things. Why? Here the master says, there is no darkness in lamplight or where it exists. So the lamplight does not have darkness, so how could it brighten the darkness it doesn't have? Here, that which illuminates, that which is not illuminated is something to be illuminated. And something is not illuminated due to being obscured by darkness, but a lamp devoid of illumination due to that lamplight being obscured by darkness does not exist. Also, it is not reasonable to say it illuminates others, for there is no darkness in other places where lamplight exists, because darkness does not exist there. A lack of illumination does not exist there. But if it does not illuminate itself or others, what does lamplight illuminate? Please respond. Objection. Illuminates since it illuminates darkness. So this commentary also is difficult to very difficult to read through, and my eyes are not very clear, and the time seems to be stuck somewhere. I got lost as I was making some comment. Here, the lamplight not arising illuminates. Since it eliminates darkness and illuminates, that is because it is said that which eliminates darkness is lamplight, and it illuminates both itself and other things. It has also been said there is no darkness in lamplight or where it exists. Therefore, because lamplight now arising eliminates darkness, therefore darkness does not exist with respect to the lamplight itself or other things. It is that which illuminates, because for it darkness does not exist. Thus, lamplight illuminates itself and others states, because it eliminates darkness. And just as the lamplight illuminates itself and others, so too it is correct to say that arising causes the generation of itself and other things. Tell me, respondents, tell me how lamplight now arising eliminates darkness for. Then lamplight is now arising. When lamplight is now arising, it does not contact darkness. How could lamplight now arising eliminates darkness? When lamplight is now arising, it does not contact darkness, because it is impossible that lamplight and darkness exist in the same place. Therefore, how could lamplight now arising eliminate darkness, since it does not contact darkness? If lamplight were to eliminate darkness without contacting it, then all the darkness enduring in the world would be eliminated by its presence. But if lamplight were to eliminate darkness without contacting it, in that case, then all the darkness enduring in the world would be eliminated by the presence of this lamplight. But since all darkness is the same in not making contact with this lamplight, how could a difference arise between it eliminating some darkness and it not eliminating darkness? Moreover, if lamplight illuminates itself and other things, then darkness would also undoubtedly obscure itself and other things. Since lamplight exists as an antithesis to darkness, then if lamplight illuminates itself and other things, it follows that darkness would also undoubtedly obscure itself and other things. However, darkness does not obscure itself and other things. If it were to obscure itself and others, then darkness itself would not be observed in just the same way others are not observed. So with regard to the arising of the thing in the moment cannot be posited as well. If darkness is not observed, things would always be illuminated. But since things are not always illuminated, therefore darkness does not obscure both itself and other things. That being so, then since lamplight, which counters darkness, does not illuminate itself and other things, so too, like lamplight, it is not correct to declare that arising also generates itself and other things. So, moreover, if arising causes generation of itself, and then either that it already arisen or that not yet arisen would cause generation of itself, but neither are tenable. In what way? The Master says, since that which arises has not yet arisen, how could it generate itself? Since that which arises has not yet arisen and does not exist, how could it cause the generation of itself? Again, what thing that is not yet arisen and does not yet exist causes the generation of itself. But if a non-existent thing generated a non-existent thing, then even a horn of a rabbit would cause the generation of itself, but it does not cause the generation of itself. That being so, that which arises has, but has not yet arisen, does not cause the generation of itself. But if you think that which is arising generates itself through having arisen, then the Master says, but if that which has arisen causes generation of itself, what will be generated if it has already arisen? So if that which arises has already arisen, then it makes no sense to say that it causes generation of itself. Since that which arises has already arisen, why would something that has already arisen arise again? In that case, it is also untenable to say that which has arisen does not cause generation of itself, and that which arises causes generation of another. As such, that which arises either causes generation of another which has already arisen or has not yet arisen, or it causes generation of that now arising. Here the Master says, in no way does it cause generation of that which has arisen, that not arisen, and that now arising. In no way does it cause the generation of that which has arisen. Also, it does not cause generation of that which has not arisen, and that which is now arising. Why? This has been explained by where one has gone, not gone, and that being gone over. As it was said that there is no going where one has gone, because the action of going has already passed. So too, because of the action of arising has already passed, it does not cause the generation of that which has arisen. Also, the action of arising does not exist for that which has arisen, but if it did not exist for that which has already arisen, then it would never not need to arise. Therefore, that is unacceptable. Thus, it does not cause generation of that which has arisen. Also, it does not cause generation of that which has not arisen. Why? Because it does not exist. What generation exists for that which has not arisen. If generation exists, even though something is non-existent, then generation would exist even for the horns of a rabbit, but such generation does not occur. As such, it does not cause generation of that which has not arisen. Moreover, it does not cause generation of that which is not now arising, because not only in that which has arisen or not yet arisen, non-existent, also that now arising is non-existent. Otherwise, it would then follow that there would be no arisings now arising. That now arising due to the possessing arising and that causing generation due to possessing arising. Furthermore, it is said, now arising that which has arisen in one part and not arisen in another part, or is it something other than which has arisen? Other which has arisen or not arisen. If that which has arisen or not arisen causes generation due to that arising, for that which is not, which is generated in one part is not generated by that arising, and that generated is not generated. Why? His Holiness got lost again. So the objection on page 10, since vases and so on arise are observed, and since vases and so on that are used for various purposes exist, therefore it may be said that if arising exists, that which now arises is generated in dependence on arising and in reliance on arising. Response: when arising exists, that which is now arising occurs. When it does not arise, how can you say that now arising is generated in dependence on arising? When arising exists, that which is now arising occurs. But when it does not exist and it is impossible, how can you say that now arising is generated in dependence on arising? Objection: how is that impossible? Response: first, how could cloth be that which now arises in dependence on that which arises? The cloth itself is now arising. If cloth that is in the process of now arising is cloth, what use would there be to say that now arising is generated in dependence on that arising? That is not tenable, because there would be no difference between both that which has arisen and now arising. Therefore, that now arising is not cloth. Objection: first, that which has arisen is cloth. And for as long as it is not analyzed, then for that long, that which now arises is generated in dependence on that which has arisen. Response: that is true, but how will that which is now arising and that had arisen in something which is not cloth become cloth? And then the next objection, and is now on the response. So the objection says, do you claim you are skilled in the use of weapons, yet strike your mother, dependent origination? Or do you criticize the very logic of dependent origination for a desire for disputation? Response. This is not the logic of dependent origination. For those who advocate dependent origination, things that are now arising do not exist, and the arising of things that are now arising does not exist. This is precisely the meaning of dependent origination, because that which is dependent and originates is free of intrinsic nature, both that which is dependent and that which originates is free of. So with regards to dependent origination, Dalai Lama-Rinpoche in his Belmar Thöpa, which is the commentary to Rinpoche's praise to the Buddha for teaching dependent origination, interspersed with his own commentary, he says that dependent origination is the king of reasoning. So the dependence shows that things have no independent existence, and origination shows that we still hold on to the conventionalities of things, and therefore dependent origination is the king of reasoning. Devoid of intrinsic and empty of intrinsic nature. Therefore, that now arising and arising also are free of intrinsic nature. Thus, because both that which is dependent and that which originates are free from intrinsic nature, devoid of intrinsic nature, empty of intrinsic nature. Therefore, for those who advocate dependent origination, for that now arising and itself are free of intrinsic nature, devoid of intrinsic nature, empty of intrinsic nature. How then could it be possible to say those two, which are empty of intrinsic nature, generate that now arising independence, arising itself? Objection to action is initiated in dependence on causes and conditions, because until a thing has arisen for that long, it is actively generated. Therefore, since such action is not initiated in dependence on the arising and just that thing itself, nor in action initiated for that which lacks a basis or cause, a thing arises in dependence on causes and conditions being activated, and it comes to arise in dependence on the arising response, in dependence on the causes and conditions of what is action initiated. Objection. Independence on those of cloth. Response. Do you gather sky flowers? Or do you initiate action in dependence on the causes and conditions of non-existent cloth? If a thing that has not yet arisen exists somewhere, then why would it come to exist? But if it exists, it would not arise. And if prior to arising, a thing that had not arisen exists somewhere, and if such a thing were possible, then it would be suitable to name the cause and the conditions, the causes and conditions of that existent thing, and the actions dependent on them. But when a thing has not arisen and is not tenable in any way, then at that time, if a thing is devoid of arising and does not exist, pertaining to that what would causes and conditions arise. Action is initiated and the thing is generated in dependence on causes and conditions. But if not initiated, it is not generated. So how could it arise? When it does not arise anywhere, how could it come to arise in dependence on that which arises? That being so, the view of those who advocate dependent origination, that both what is now arising and arising itself are free of intrinsic nature. Moreover, if this arising causes generation of that now arising, what arising causes generation of that arising? If this arising causes generation of another now arising, then what arising causes generation of that arising? But if you think that another arising causes generation of it, then the Master says, if another arising causes generation of it, and infinite regress would ensue. If another arising causes the generation of this now arising, then in that case, an infinite regress would ensue. Also, since the generated by another and that also being generated by another would reveal an endless process, it is unacceptable. But if you think that generating another arises solely without arising, then the Master explains. But if something arises without another arising, then everything would arise in that way. So moreover, on page 13, it says, moreover, if things were to arise, they would arise either as existent or non-existent entities. It is not logical an existent or non-existent thing arise. Now it is logical. It is not logical that an existent thing arises because it is pointless to consider that it arises. What use is it for something that already exists to arise again? Also, it is not logical for a non-existent thing to arise. Why? Because it is non-existent. What use is it for it to arise? But if a non-existent thing were to arise, then the horns of a rabbit would also arise. Fault would arise for those whose faults have been eradicated. Therefore, this is unacceptable. That being so, it is non-logical that non-existent things arise. But if you think something that is both existent and non-existent arises, then nor also that both existent and non-existent, nor also it is logical that something both existent and non-existent arise. In what way? This was explained earlier. Previously, it was said it is not logical that an existent or non-existent thing arise. Both existent and non-existent existence are refuted by the previous refutation, since these two follow each other. Further, it was already taught in the first chapter that any type of arising regarding that which is existent, non-existent, or both existent and non-existent is inappropriate. Where was that? When no phenomena, whether existent, non-existent, nor existent nor non-existent are established, how could that which establishes them be called a cause? If that were so, it would be illogical. Moreover, for a thing now ceasing, arising is not tenable. Here you state, it causes generation of thing now arising. Therefore, a thing that is now arising also comes to cease. Why? Because things possess characteristics of disintegrating. For a thing now ceasing arising is not tenable, because for that which now arises, it arises through developing, while that which ends does not arise, since it comes to an end due to disintegrating. But if you think that when something arises, it will not come to cease, then our response is, it is untenable. There is a thing which is now ceasing. If a thing now arising did not cease, that now arising would not be a thing. Why is that? Because it would not have the characteristic of a thing. Thus, since disintegration is taught to be a characteristic of a thing, if a thing lacks disintegration, how could that thing exist? If that is so, then the statement, it causes generation of a thing that is now arising would fail, and it follows that it would also cause generation of a non-existent thing that is now arising. That being so, also to say it causes generation of another, since it arises, is untenable. But now how could that which does not arise, the generation of itself, cause the generation of another? Thus arising does not exist. Endurance exists. Further, since it is not tenable that things have not arisen, also arising is fully established. Response: if things endure, does that which has endured endure? Does that which has not endured endure? Or does that which is now enduring endure? In that regard, a thing that has endured does not cause endurance. A thing that has endured, not endured, does not cause endurance. Also, that now enduring does not cause endurance. First, a thing that has endured does not cause endurance. What use would there be for that which has already endured to endure again? It follows that endurance would be twofold: that which endures due to possessing endurance, and that causing endurance due to possessing endurance. If that were so, then the one who endures also would be twofold, but that is unacceptable. Also, a thing that has not endured does not cause endurance. Why? Because the two, that which has endured and that which has not endured, is incompatible. Also, now that enduring does not cause endurance, because that now enduring, that is separate from that which has endured, and that which has not endured is impossible. Also, it follows that endurance would be to fault, and the agent as well would be to fault. Moreover, what other thing that has not arisen cause endurance? So we're on page 15. So when all things always possess the properties of aging and death, what are those things that endure without aging and death? When all things are related to impermanence, it is accepted that they possess the properties of aging and death due to being impermanent. At that time, independent on what does enduring exist? What are those things that endure without aging and death? That being so, also enduring is not tenable. Now we shall explain what is called the endurance of endurance. It is not logical that endurance endures due to another or itself enduring. It is not logical that endurance endures because endurance of endurance caused by another enduring, nor is it logical that endurance is endurance caused by itself enduring. In what way? Just as a rising is not generated by itself or another. It was previously said, since that which arises has not arisen, now how could it generate itself? But if that which has arisen causes generation of itself, what will be generated if it has already arisen? So too also, endurance is either endurance caused by itself, not enduring, or an endurance cause. It is endurance caused by itself enduring. In that regard, first, it is not endurance caused by itself, not enduring. Why? Because it does not exist. As such, endurance is untenable for that which has not endured. How could that which does not exist cause its endurance? But if it does not cause endurance, even the horn of a rabbit itself would cause its own endurance, but this is unacceptable. Hence, it is not endurance caused by itself, not enduring. It is not endurance caused by itself enduring. Why? Because it is endurance itself. What use is it for endurance to endure again? Hence, though endurance endures, it does not cause its own endurance. How could that which does not cause endurance endure? Hence, it is not endurance caused by itself enduring. How is it logical that endurance is caused by another enduring? It was said, if another arising causes generation of it, an infinite regress would ensue. But if something arises without another arising, then everything would arise in that way. So too, endurance is either endurance caused by another enduring or endurance caused by without another enduring. First, in that regard, endurance is not endurance caused by another enduring. If endurance is endurance caused by another enduring, that an infinite regress would ensue. So objection on page 16 says cessation exists. And also arising and enduring are fully established, since it is untenable that things have not arisen and do not endure. So if something is said to cease, it should also have arisen and endured. Is the comment His Holiness made, and in response, if a thing is that is now ceasing exists, then it is that which has ceased and has not ceased, or is it now ceasing? But this is not tenable in any way. Why? That which has ceased does not cause cessation. Also that which has not ceased does not cause cessation. And also that now ceasing does not cause cessation. First, that which has ceased does not cause cessation. Why? Because it does not exist. How would that which does not exist come to cease? Also that which has now ceased does not cause cessation. Why? Because ceased and not ceased are incompatible. Also, that now ceasing in the same way does not cause cessation. Why? Because as it is said, it does not cause the generation of that now arising. Therefore, now that now arising, that is separate from that which has ceased and not ceased, is impossible. Also, it follows that because cessation would be twofold, and that now ceasing would be twofold. Therefore, that now ceasing does not cause cessation. Moreover, that now ceasing is something that has ceased in one part and not ceased in another part, or otherwise that which has ceased and not ceased with respect to another. If that which has partially ceased and partially not ceased causes stoppage due to ceasing, then one part has not yet stopped since it is ceasing. That which ceases is now ceasing. Why? Because it is said that if it ceases, it's now ceasing, and that now ceasing causes stoppage. So I think we stop there. Page 17. I hope I got it right. My gosh. It's all